Pre-budget production, where we will look at some of the government's major projects in the last year. I am Leslie Ann Johnson. In roughly 1 hour, Finance Minister Dr. The Right Honorable Keith Mitchell will present the 2020 budget under the theme Towards Vision 2035, empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, strengthening our institutions. It seeks to build on the plans and programs envisioned in the country's 2020 to 2035 National Sustainable Development Plan. We get the ball rolling with an interview with Chair of the National Plan Technical Group, Dr. Carrie Grenade, who speaks of the importance of linking the budget with the 2035 National Plan. Thereafter, we will focus on major projects. And at 9:30, we will begin our live commentary, which takes us up to 10 o'clock for the presentation of the fiscal package by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
The date for the presentation of the 2020 budget is quickly approaching, and as is customary, Grenadians are looking forward to what government's monetary allocations for the various sectors will be. The theme for Budget 2020 is Towards Vision 2035, empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, strengthening our institutions. This theme ties in symmetrically with the 2035 National Sustainable Plan, which is being designed to incorporate the ideas and expectations of Grenadians as a guide to where the people would want the country to be in approximately 16 years from now. Chair of the National Plan Technical Group, Dr. Carrie Grenade, explains why it is important to have the budget linked to the 2035 National Plan.
So the National Sustainable Development Plan is a long-term plan for Grenada. It covers the period 2020 to 2035, so 16-year period. And it is really the anchor for Grenada's Sustainable Development Agenda that period. So it's a blueprint really that sets out strategic priorities and actions to be taken to address certain key challenges in specific areas, for example, society, the economy, and environment. So with respect to the society, there are several strategic actions, in total about 211 strategic actions that are set out to address problems in education, in health, with respect to gender inequality, with respect to child protection, social protection, with respect to elderly care, persons with vulnerable disabilities, and so on. With respect to the economy, strategic actions are set out to make the economy much more competitive, much more diverse. So we're talking about diversity issues in agriculture, how to really modernize agricultural practices and add value to our production. We're talking about new economic areas as well, new economic frontiers we call them. So the blue economy, green economy, orange economy, how do we use our cultural assets, our heritage assets? How do we leverage those for economic viability? And of course, the plan is a lot as well with the environment and climate resilience. How do we build resilience to climate change? Whether it's in terms of our infrastructure, how do we develop much more resilient infrastructure? How do we adapt to climate change in specific areas, for example, agriculture, the water sector, and so on. So in total, there are about 211 strategic priorities set out to be implemented over the 16-year period to really help us to help us promote sustainable development. And it's important to underscore that it's a sustainable development plan. So that means that there must be harmonious relationship between the economy, the society, and the environment. And of course, linking all those three together would be governance. Very strong governance and institutional arrangement.
Significant progress 3.5 months after the sword was turned, signaling the commencement of work on the Government of Grenada and the OPEC Fund for International Development St. Patrick Road Upgrade Project. The St. Patrick Project is part of 24 other projects that were approved by Cabinet in April 2019. The construction of culverts, drains, retaining walls and concrete reinforced sidewalks has been awarded to Caribbean Consolidated Contractors Limited (CCC). On Monday, CCC Site Superintendent Joseph Maitland updated GIS on the progress of work at Belmont, Callaloo, The Wharf and Grogu Bailey Hill. Our first stop was at the site in Belmont, where a massive 100-meter-long retaining wall is under construction.
This is the beginning of the Sotej Hermitage Rehabilitation Project. All right? We are tackling all the major aspect of the work, which will include like all the major structure of retaining wall, box culvert, and all the major cuts in terms of expansion of road widening. All right? Here we are now in Belmont. Well, this is one of our major retaining structure in Belmont. It's almost 100 meters long. All right? We started this on the 16th of last month. Right now we are 45% in completion. Okay? We have numerous around 65 people working on the project, which includes like foremen, masons, carpenters, but basically all of them are Grenadians. Mostly the whole project is spearheaded by the engineer and the project manager, who is expatriate. But the majority aspect of everybody working here are totally Grenadians.
On completion of the construction of the retaining wall, the following scope of works will have to be carried out.
All right, the next step, as you see, it's the retaining wall basically responsible for the expansion of road widening. We are doing road widening here. What you realize, you see the height of the wall. So after this wall is completed, we have to backfill this wall in layers by layers. Make sure it's within the requirement of the specs, because we have to do it layer by layer compaction and bring it up to the elevation which is given for the road level. There is a specific elevation for the road level which is responsible. So when we finish construct this wall, we will backfill it right up and to the elevation of the road, and then we take it from there.
How much foot stemming and the stem at the bottom is how thick? How?
Is 40. All right? And it's reached up to, I think, 30 to the top. All right? Basically, the stem is wider, but as the walls goes down, he has a structure where he comes back up to the top at 30 centimeters.
Civil technician at Dairy Consults, Christian DeBellet, was on site and says thus far all the construction work are being done to specification.
On the project, we are responsible for design and supervision. So essentially, we did these essential designs, everything, and now we're supervising to ensure that it's done to that standard.
In terms of the design, and so is it that you all had to do was testing part of your all work, and tell us about your design and specification as to what has to happen here in order for it to be passed?
Well, testing was done initially, and there's continuous testing throughout. For example, the concrete is tested, the sub-base, sub-grade, everything is tested to meet requirements. If not, you fail and have to do it over.
One of the hindrances to the smooth execution of the project, Mr. Matlin says, is the electricity pole that is yet to be relocated by Grenlec.
You see, but everything had to coordinate it, because you know there is public utilities who are supposed to be working along with us, like Grenlec, Nawasa. So far, Nawasa is 100% in cooperation with us. Whenever we have a problem, we just inform them and they are here. But Grenlec has came. They had already identified all the poles that's supposed to remove. You notice there is one at the location at Belmont, which is right in the excavation part of the job. And as far as you go, you will notice that there are several poles that is within that. In order to commence the work to the pace we want to go, all these poles have to be relocated.
Our next stop was at an area in Hermitage referred to as the Callaloo, where excavation work on a retaining wall and the box culvert is presently being carried out by Farah Construction Company.
We are commencing our second major retaining wall. All right, it's a distance of 65 meters long. All right, what you are seeing here right now is that to commence the work, to finish it at the required time, what we did is that we have a few local subcontractors. And in this aspect of this job here, Fari Construction is doing this retaining wall. All right, the base is 3.8 meters wide. That's the base of the wall. But then the same format is just like the one down at Belmont. The stem will be 40 and it rises up to. But the height of this one is 5 meters. All right. What you are seeing here right now is that we are preparing the excavation. The company, we are doing the excavation, preparing, and then they do the blinding. When they blind, that is for the formation to place in the steel. You must have to stabilize the ground first, compact it, stabilize it, blast the rock, whatever is required, make sure it's stabilized. The inspector from DV will come and inspect to see it is required, what we are looking for, and then we start the formwork. So what you are doing basically right now is excavating and preparing for the base formation. So this is where you will find that the river been doing some tremendous hazard around this area. The existing before this area normally overflow all the time. All around, the water overflow the banks and it flood the area. What we are doing here now, we are reconstructing a new massive box culvert. All right, we is in the initial stage. We did the blinding, and right now we are doing the formation of the steelwork. All right, this is also being subbed to Fari Construction. All right, the length of it is 8.2 of the box culvert. The width is 8.6. It varies to a height about 2.7 height. So that would be able to adequate the flow of the water. At least it would facilitate all the overflow of the water. So what you see we are doing here now is that we did a diversion, which we are standing here right now, so we could accommodate the construction in terms of the box culvert. All right, when we complete the box culvert, then we will prepare the whole area back to the normal way how it was. So right now this is one of our major box culvert. We has 2 more to build, but this is the first one. It's just an initial stage. Let me see, about 20%, 25%.
The team then moved to another area in Hermitage called the Wharf, where road expansion works is ongoing on 2 retaining walls that has been subcontracted to Bullins Construction Company, one 25.5 meters long and 3 meters high, and the other 26.5 meters.
$5.3 million school complex for the Holy Cross RC School in Munich, St. Andrew, was officially handed over during a ceremony on Wednesday, August 28th, at the new school location adjacent to the original school building. This project is part of the U.S. $32.2 million Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project. Annette Moore reports on the handing over ceremony, which was attended by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, government ministers, and other officials.
Work began on the new school building on June 19, 2017, with a sod-turning ceremony which marked the commencement of work on June 23rd of that year. Work was expected to be completed by June 2018, but due to several delays was completed approximately 1 year later in 2019. Principal of the Holy Cross RC School, Edlyn Ruffin Modeste, expressed her gratitude for the new facilities.
At last, we have an environment that is conducive for learning, that is geared towards maximizing its occupants' fullest potentials, and for that we are grateful. This facility provides the ideal learning environment for students and the teaching environment desired and coveted by many.
The prior school building, which was destroyed by Hurricane Ivan in September 2004, housed approximately 200 students. Later in 2004, the school population was relocated to another location about a mile away from the original school grounds in the RC Church Parish Hall, which also serves as a community center for Munich and the surrounding communities.
It was very uncomfortable because termites used to be falling down in our hair, and every Saturdays I have to be washing my hair.
Ministers Pear and Bain Horsford thanked the community, staff of the school, and the parents for their patience during the relocation process.
I therefore wish to recognize and particularly commend the staff, students, and parents for your patience demonstrated. Whilst operations continued in an environment that was visibly deteriorating day by day.
I wish to applaud the parents and guardians who took the decision to keep your children in the Holy Cross RC School, even while the conditions were less than adequate. You gave a new lease. You gave a new lease to life to the school, of life to the school. Your decision is what made today possible.
The school, which is now located on an elevation adjacent to the old school building, comprises a 2-story main building with a single-story annex linked by a covered walkway. The main building contains 8 classrooms on the upper floor and 3 classrooms on the lower floor, a pre-primary school, a computer and audiovisual laboratory, home economics center, staff room, and library. The annex comprises a student washroom, kitchen and lunchrooms, woodwork shop, and storage and janitorial facilities. The school property will also be fenced. Education Minister Honorable Emmeline Pear expressed her hope of seeing an increase in the enrollment at the Holy Cross RC School given the excellent new facilities available. She also encouraged the community to utilize the facility for the pursuit of lifelong learning and noted that this project is one of many in government's efforts to refurbish and rebuild schools damaged by Hurricanes Ivan and Emily.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are here at the Parliament Building at Montwelldale. We are coming to you live on GIS Channel 22 if you're on cable. And of course, wherever you are on stream with us, we say good morning. I am Brenda Batiste. It is Budget Day on Grenada. Today, Wednesday, the 20th of November, 2019. In just under 40 minutes or so, Prime Minister Dr. the Honourable Keith Mitchell will deliver his 14th budget to the Parliament of Grenada. This morning here from Montwelldale, I'm pleased to be covering this event with a veteran journalist, Mrs. Selwyn Noel. And good morning, Selok.
Pleasant morning. It's an auspicious occasion. It's usually an auspicious occasion.
Yeah.
If you follow the presentation of budgets, even from the Westminster system, there's always this flamboyance about it, people coming to actually hear what it is. it takes on a political tone sometimes, and you would probably see supporters of the political environment dressing in fancy colors to come to the parliament to listen to the presentation of the budget. This is British style, it's always unique. And before we continue, I want to say a pleasant morning to all Grenada, the rest of the OECS and the wider region as a whole, because indeed it's a time in Grenada in particular where we're making that governance transition, and there will be a number of new initiatives, a number of initiatives are taking place to set the tone for what we normally would say is the future. And with us, Brenda, especially with budgets, we look at the arguments from an intellectual level, and we're talking about economics, so to speak. Very hefty topic, economics.
Well, I guess the verbiage surrounding economics is hefty, but at the end of the day, if you run a household, you run a small business, or in your own management, you can break it down to that. But here with us this morning, the man who speaks the science, who understands it, and of course who wears a very, very, very broad shoulders as the head of the Debt Management Unit, Ministry of Finance, Mr. Kerry Pear. Good morning, Mr. Pear.
Pleasant good morning. Good morning to you and to all our listeners here in Grenada and in the region and in the broader diaspora.
Yeah, you must say good morning to those in the diaspora, the 16th constituency, if you will. So here we are on the cusp of the budget for today, and the theme for today's budget, Towards Vision 2035, empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, and strengthening our institutions. And you may wonder about Towards Vision 2035. What is Vision 2035? And of course, Mr. Pear, you guide us through that.
So over the past 5 years or so, 4 to 5 years, the Ministry of Finance, through an extensive consultative process, would have met with the citizenry of Grenada, would have met with different stakeholders, and would have sat and discussed a long-term plan. Long-term because a budget is a one-year budget. And at the Ministry of Finance, we actually prepare what is called a medium-term budget, which is 3 years worth of forecasting and planning. But if we really and truly want to achieve the level of development and growth that we desire, we need to think beyond the short and medium term. We need to look in the distance. Where do we want to be 10 years from now? What is the vision we have for Grenada 10 years from now? What is the vision we have for the different sectors? Where do we want to see health? Where do we want to see tourism? Where do we want to see the social well-being of our people? And so the Ministry of Finance would have enlisted the services of one of our local homegrown consultants, Dr. Carrie Grenade, and other teams of persons from throughout the diaspora to engage the people and to begin the process of developing a plan by Grenadians for Grenadians that seeks to develop Grenada. And that is where the Vision 2030, the National Sustainable Development Plan, that is its genesis. And thankfully, we have a document prepared and presented. It should be presented to Parliament in this budget process, which details this plan. Now, remember, this plan is a broad plan. So I would have heard persons speaking about the costing of the plan. It's difficult as is to cost a 3-year budget. So imagine when you're talking about a 15-year plan. We can only see and predict so far into the future, with any level of accuracy. Beyond 3 years, then your accuracy begins to drop sharply. So this plan is a broad plan that is supposed to guide the budget process. Every aspect of the budget is supposed to be linked to this plan. So this is our broad guiding policy document. You would see that we would also take into consideration, for example, the throne speech, the any priority documents, policy documents that are provided by cabinet, because the budget is the tool to implement government's plan and government's vision for this country.
Right. So I guess in essence, you're saying that this budget that we presented today by Prime Minister is really anchored by the National Development Plan.
Very much so.
Okay, great. So now we get into the meat of the matter, things that people will be looking, the Public Finance Management Act, the roles and responsibility for management of public finance, because there's a lot of that to be here. And remember, it's a fiscal package, so revenue, expenditure, of course, the financing of those is like writing down the wish list of things you have to achieve, and then how do you get the money to do those. So, of course, we need to hear, just a bit of how the financing, and we start off with like Public Finance Management Act, and you can take us through that portion of it.
Okay, good. So we started with Selwyn saying that the economics of it is a hefty package. Economics in its simplest definition is simply how do we manage scarce resources. That is what economics is all about, the management of scarce resources. And when we come down to our budget, the budget is the plan for the management of the resources of the government. And it simply details what we hope to collect, and our plans for spending, whether we are going to finance that spending through revenues that we generate, whether we are going to finance that spending through loans, whether we're going to do that from grants from friendly governments. So our budget in its simplest nature is an expenditure plan. But the budget didn't drop from the sky. The budget has its genesis in the Constitution. Our Constitution, Section 77, states that the Minister for Finance has the responsibility to lay in Parliament for the upcoming year a budget, and he must do so within the present year. It goes on further to say that if the funds appropriated through this budget is insufficient, then there is the recourse of doing a supplementary budget later on down the road. And it goes on further to say that when the budget is approved in Parliament, then we need to do what is called an appropriation bill in order to legalize the amounts that is quoted in the budget for use during the course of the upcoming year. So our Constitution lays the ground for the preparation and execution of the budget. But the Constitution speaks in a broad sense, so we do have other legislation which supports the process. We have the Public Finance Management Act. We have the fiscal responsibility legislation. And I'm certain you hear a lot of this, the FRL. Contained therein is basically a set of best practices which ensures that government prepares a budget that is fiscally responsible, that is efficient, that is effective. And so the whole budget preparation and execution is guided by a set of laws that are internationally accepted. It's not just a group of rules that we've placed together here in Grenada. We would have gone out, we would have researched, we would have found what is the best practices as it relates to the fiscal management of any country, and we put those together, and we have with us the laws that guide us in the preparation of the national budget.
What usually happens in situations when there are crises in being able to finance a budget and being able to comfortably execute that yearly plan? I notice that these days there's this reliance on climate, this whole climate factor coming into play. The SIDS in particular taking it up very seriously because they are mostly affected. This might be one aspect, but otherwise than that, how would economics adjust itself when there are crises in situations of the presentation of a yearly plan?
Okay, so we live in a very dynamic world. We're preparing a budget now at the end of 2019 for 2020, and we estimate and we try as best as possible to have a sense of what do we think may happen in the upcoming year. However, we really and truly do not have control of all the factors, so things may occur which will affect your ability to function, which may affect the effectiveness of your budget. You may have planned for certain contingencies, you may not have planned for them. So we have to respond from the Ministry of Finance perspective. We have to respond to the changes that we encounter in the environment. So you may find, for example, we had the financial crisis. Nobody foresaw the financial crisis coming, and as a result, we were affected. Financial investments coming from the outside was affected. Remittances, the money that is sent home by persons, Grenadians living in the diaspora to their families home in Grenada, was severely affected. And it affects one's ability to meet their needs. It affected the government's ability to meet their needs, so the government needed to respond. And one of the things we had to do is, let's see where we can find savings. You know, how can we be efficient in the management of government's expenditure? You know, can we cut back on discretionary spending because we now have to find funds to do the things that we didn't plan for, or to execute projects where the funding dried up, where the funding disappeared, because we did have projects where the funding for those projects disappeared in the financial crisis. The investors were no longer able to invest as they had planned. And if these projects were deemed to be priority projects, then the government had no other option but to try and raise the financing to execute those. So the process of executing a budget is not a stagnant one, it's dynamic. We need to be nimble enough to respond to any emergencies or any unforeseen things that may happen out there that affects the efficient execution of the budget.
Right. As we inch closer to the Prime Minister's presentation, naturally we are forecasting for 2020, so it is prudent that we look at 2019 and what was forecasted in 2018 for 2019. So we want to specifically ask about growth, naturally inflation, the big word, unemployment, the even bigger word, public debt, the government finances, just a general performance of 2019 as we project for 2020.
Okay, good. Now, I don't want to preempt the Prime Minister's delivery on some of the numbers in the performance for 2019, but I must say that the Ministry of Finance is satisfied with the results that we're seeing. We've had good growth, albeit not as strong as we would have initially projected, but that is understood.
Going to just leave it at good?
Well, I'm going to leave it at good at this point in time. The Prime Minister will deliver on the numbers, and after his speech, then we can.
Go ahead. Just go ahead. Talk about it.
Okay, so after his speech, we can probably get into the numbers.
Right.
What I can say is that we saw a slowdown in growth in the global economy, especially with our trading partners in the US, in the UK. The growth that was initially projected for them at the start of 2019 didn't happen. And as a result, we also were affected in terms of the level of our growth, but our growth was pretty good. The deceleration that we saw in growth was not that significant.
Okay.
Of course, we would want to achieve the highest possible growth that we can within any given year, you know. But what we saw was pretty good.
You mentioned the situation in the outside countries affecting our growth here. Why is that?
Now, remember, our economy is what we call an open and vulnerable economy. We import. We have very high levels of import. Grenada is a net importing country. So when things happen outside there with our trading partners, for example, inflation, we have what is called imported inflation. When the prices go up on the outside, we purchase from these very same trading partners. If prices go up in the US and we're purchasing from the US, it means we are now paying more. And if we import goods at higher prices, then we're going to sell goods at higher prices. And so what happens on the outside, at the end of the day, is translated to us here in Grenada. So we have what is called imported inflation because of the inflation that is happening on the outside. So, you know, our economy is open and vulnerable, as we say, meaning that, you know, we are susceptible to outside influences. And that's just speaking about our trading partner. based on where we're located, we have the effects of climate change. You know, we have a lot of other bits and pieces that can affect our economies and its performances.
Right. In terms of performance, you just touched on inflation briefly as you dovetail into a specific point. But in terms of inflation for the year just passed, well, the fiscal year 2019, how would you rate that?
What we've seen is that inflation has remained pretty low and stable, just around 1% in that area. And we've seen that over the past couple of years. In the prior years where we had, for example, high volatility in the prices of oil, we found that prices shifted and increased based on the increase on the price of oil. And we understand why. Oil is used in the generation of electricity. Electricity is used in the production of almost all goods and services that we partake in. So, you know, once we see the inputs, the prices in the inputs are going up because of the increase in prices in oil, then effectively what we're going to have is that there's going to be an increase in the prices. You know, but what we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is that inflation has been low. It has been pretty stable. And just for clarity, you know, when we speak of inflation, we speak of the rise in prices from one year to another. You know, sometimes people get that a little bit mixed up, you know, but just for clarity's sake.
Yeah, we always have to bring it back to what you do at the kitchen table. In terms of unemployment, the performance unemployment, let's say the last 3 years or the year just passed.
So we've seen unemployment going down. Unemployment reached, if I remember correctly, its peak in around the year 2013. And from then on, we saw a decline in the levels of unemployment. However, we must point out that even though unemployment is on its way down, it is still high. If I remember correctly, at the end of 2018, the last official number coming from the Statistics Office was around 16-17%, or if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but I'm not far off on that number. And what we found is that youth unemployment remains particularly high. So that, of course, is a target area for the government and its policies. How is it going to deal with youth and youth unemployment? I believe that the Statistics Office would have produced some new numbers, especially for the first quarter of 2019. That, however, I would leave to the Prime Minister to deliver in his speech.
I see something here on our fact sheet that the 2020 budget is forecasting a primary surplus of $212.8 million and equivalent to 6.1% of the projected GDP for 2020, and which is somewhat at the range of the requirement to contain the fiscal responsibility law. The legislation that keeps the government in check, or the Grenada's finances in check, to ensure that everything remains stable. What basically is the advantage of this primary surplus?
Okay, so our fiscal responsibility legislation has in it a set of guidelines as to what is best practice, what is sound fiscal management. One of these things states that we must generate a primary surplus. Now, if we take this back to the home, we can look at it like this. You go to work, you receive a salary, and then you have expenses for you and your family for the month before you receive another salary. What the primary surplus is telling us is that you must not spend more than you earn in the given period. For us, the budget is a year, and we need to ascertain that our spending is controlled to the level that it does not exceed how much we've earned during the course of the year. So it's good basic financial practices. Don't spend more than you can finance. Now, there are cases when you can spend more than you've earned, because you can go to the bank and borrow, or you can get grants from friendly governments, from friendly organizations. But you can only do that for so long. That is a stopgap measure. This is a short-term measure. You don't expect to live your entire life borrowing and asking for grants from those who might be able to support you. They would only support you for so long before they say, enough is enough. You need to be able to paddle your own canoe, as we say. So by law, we are required to generate a surplus, meaning that when we've taken away our recurrent expenditure from what we've collected in terms of revenues, we must have something left over in the bank. And what is left over is primarily used to finance what we call public sector investment programs. These are the projects, the big projects that you see out there, and these projects are usually essential in driving growth and development within the country. That is a tool that the governments use to directly drive as much as possible growth and development within the country, the public sector investment programs, the big capital projects that you see going on out there, the schools that are being built, the roads that are being repaired. These large financial capital investments, that's where the surplus now is supposed to help finance.
As we paddle to 10 o'clock, I quickly want to hear about government finances 2019, really the revenues, expenditures, with the decline and growth and so on, or uptick, and just generally whether there was acceleration, whether in some cases there were challenges. Just kind of give us a sense of how that performed for the fiscal year 2019.
Okay, so every fiscal year is a challenging year. Let me start by saying that, because we manage on a month-to-month basis government finances. Although at the start of the year we prepare a budget, the budget is an estimate. It is an estimate. It's not, it's the best estimate that we can do. But the true management comes on a month-to-month basis. When you've seen what it is you've collected, when you have in front of you what it is you need to spend, when you can compare, how am I doing against my projections? Am I meeting my projections? Am I passing my projections? That is where the true challenge is, because now we're no longer looking at a document that is just estimate. We are now dealing with the reality of the situation. So every year has its challenges, but having challenges is not failures. Having challenges just means that you need to pay attention to what you're doing, and you need to be on top of your game to deliver as we would have promised to deliver. So 2019 was a relatively good year. Like I said, there was a slight deceleration in the projections for growth, but we did have strong growth. And we understand, coming out of the structural adjustment program in 2015,